You know, it's funny how some things just stick with you.
Yeah.
Like, I bet you can still picture the energy at Trump's inauguration back in 2017.
Oh, absolutely.
It felt like a turning point for a lot of folks.
For conservatives especially, there was this huge surge of optimism.
Yeah.
It felt like they finally had a chance to make some really big changes.
And that energy hasn't gone away, it seems.
Not at all.
It's morphed into this thing called Project 2025.
Right.
Which is what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
We've got reports, articles, even a whole book called Mandate for Leadership to help us figure out what it's all about.
Interesting you bring up that book. It's like a deliberate echo of a book from Reagan's first term. So they're definitely trying to tack into that same energy.
So they're hoping for like a Reagan 2.0 situation?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good comparison.
Okay.
They basically want a government that shrinks its influence, dismantles what they call the administrative state, and puts power back in the hands of individuals.
So let's unpack that administrative state thing for a second.
Sure.
What exactly are they talking about there?
It's basically the whole network of federal agencies and regulations that they think has gotten too big and too intrusive.
Okay.
It's all this bureaucracy they want to cut back.
So it's not just about smaller government in general.
Right.
It's about going after specific parts of the bureaucracy that they see as problematic.
Yeah, and they go beyond just talking about smaller government in general. They've actually come up with a super detailed plan.
Oh, wow.
For how they would go about dismantling things, even recommending specific people for key positions.
No, that's thinking ahead.
They're not just hoping for change. They're getting ready to actually make it happen.
From day one.
From the moment a Republican president takes office.
Wow.
They even say things like the chief of staff, White House counsel, director of presidential personnel are all super important for this transformation.
It's interesting how much emphasis they put on personnel.
Right.
It's like they're saying having the right people in the right jobs is just as important as the policies themselves.
Absolutely. They say personnel is policy. They really see this sharp divide between what they call the Washington establishment and everyday Americans.
Interesting.
They think the elites, including people in government, academia, and the media, are totally out of touch with what regular people want and need.
So it's more than just about ideology.
Yeah.
It's about who's actually in charge and whose interests they're serving.
Exactly.
It's like they're setting up a battle between the people and the elites.
That's a big part of their message for sure.
And it's a message that probably resonates with a lot of people.
I think so.
Who feel like the government doesn't listen to them.
Yeah.
This push for politically aligned people seems to go beyond just the White House, though, right? They also talk about reshaping those policy councils.
Like the National Security Council, the National Economic Council.
Exactly.
They see these councils as being really important for coordinating policy across all the different agencies. They want to make sure those councils are staffed with people who are fully on board with their agenda.
So it's about making sure the president's vision is implemented across the entire government.
That's the idea.
It sounds like they're going for a top-down approach.
Yeah.
With loyalists driving policy from the White House all the way down to the agencies.
Right.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Let's start with a specific department.
Okay.
How about the Department of Defense?
Okay, so with Defense Project, 2025 is all about going back to military readiness as the top priority. They say the military has become too focused on what they call leftist politics.
Like what kind of things?
Things like diversity and inclusion initiatives. They want to shift the focus back to combat effectiveness.
So a more traditional view of the military's role.
Right.
Focused on strength and preparedness rather than social issues.
Exactly.
Go.
They also want to really beef up the nuclear arsenal, expand the defense industry, and take a much tougher stance against China.
Oh, interesting.
They see China as the biggest threat to the U.S. right now, and they want to be a lot more confrontational with them.
It's interesting how China keeps coming up as a major concern across all these different areas.
They see China as a rival on the world stage, and I want to push back against that.
What about domestic issues?
Okay.
What about the Department of Homeland Security?
Oh, they're calling for a major crackdown on illegal immigration.
Okay.
They want to give ICE more power, tighten up asylum rules, and make border security way stronger.
Wow.
Some of them even want to get rid of the Department of Homeland Security entirely. Yeah, they think other agencies could do the job better.
That's a pretty big change.
It is.
It suggests they really want to rethink how the government handles immigration.
Yeah, and border security.
That's a big deal.
They see illegal immigration as a huge threat to national security.
Okay.
And they want to go back to much stricter enforcement of immigration laws.
And what about the State Department?
Okay.
How do they see the future of American diplomacy?
Well, their vision for the State Department lines up with this idea of a more assertive foreign policy. They want to push back hard against China's influence around the world, reform the State Department to be more in line with the president's agenda, and basically just take a harder line in negotiations with other countries.
So they want to move away from what they might see as a more conciliatory approach.
Yeah, or a multilateral approach.
Okay.
That previous administrations have taken.
What about the intelligence community?
Okay.
Any big shakeups planned there?
Yeah. They talk about the need to streamline the security clearance process.
Okay.
They say it takes too long. It's too bureaucratic. And it keeps them from getting the right people into important jobs quickly.
Okay.
They also want to strengthen counterintelligence, especially against China and Russia.
Okay.
And they're open to changing the role of the Director of National Intelligence.
Interesting.
Maybe giving the president more direct control over the intelligence agencies.
Streamlining security clearances while also emphasizing loyalty seems a bit counterintuitive.
I can see that.
Right.
But they say the current process is just too cumbersome. It often holds up people who are qualified, but who also share their ideology.
I see.
They see it as a roadblock to having a truly conservative government. Running from day one.
So speed and efficiency are key to their plan.
Absolutely.
They want to hit the ground running and put their vision into action as quickly as possible.
They feel like time is of the essence.
Okay.
They need to move fast to undo what they see as years of damage caused by liberal policies.
That sense of urgency seems to be a big motivator for them.
It really does. It's kind of wild how Project 2025 talks about this Sabbath idea.
Yeah, that caught my eye too.
Like, it sounds almost philosophical.
Right.
But how does it actually translate into policy?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too.
Well, this Sabbath isn't just symbolic. They see it as like a time for the government to rest.
Okay.
To step back a little. And let people and businesses do their thing without interference.
So they're basically trying to undo what they see as decades
Right.
of progressive policies.
And government overreach.
Exactly.
They think the federal government has gotten way too big.
Okay.
Too intrusive, too out of touch with what people actually need.
So they want to shift the balance of power back towards individuals, states,
Right.
and the private sector.
Exactly.
That's a pretty big shift
It is.
from the way things are now.
It's a fundamental change in how they see the role of government.
Do they give any concrete examples of what this Sabbath would actually look like?
One of the most striking examples is this idea of a regulatory budget.
Okay, what's that?
So basically, they want to set a limit on how much regulations cost businesses and people.
Interesting.
It's like putting a cap on how much red tape the government can create.
Oh, I see.
Like a household budget, but for regulations.
Right.
It forces them to make choices about what's really important.
So they can't just keep adding more and more rules.
Exactly. They have to prioritize.
Makes sense.
They also want to streamline the permitting process for infrastructure projects.
Okay.
They say the current process is way too slow and complicated, and it's holding back economic growth.
Which fits with their emphasis on energy independence and infrastructure.
They see those as key areas where the government is getting in the way.
Right. Instead of helping.
Exactly. They want to unleash the private sector to drive innovation and growth.
This Sabbath idea isn't just about economic policy, though, right?
No, it goes beyond that.
Okay.
It touches on social and cultural issues, too.
Like what?
Well, they talk about a reduced government role in things like education and healthcare.
Interesting.
They want to roll back what they see as government intrusion in those areas.
So less government involvement in schools?
Yeah.
Less government regulation of healthcare?
Right.
More support for traditional family structures?
Exactly. They think those are areas where individual choice and traditional values should be front and center.
It's a vision that will definitely appeal to a lot of conservatives.
For sure.
But it also raises concerns about what it would mean for people who depend on government programs.
That's a valid point.
And protections.
Their vision is all about individual responsibility and limited government. And that could have a big impact on the most vulnerable people in society.
It makes me think about the comparison to Reagan again.
Yeah.
They clearly see him as a model.
They're hoping to recreate that kind of conservative revolution.
But can they really do that in today's world?
That's the big question.
Things have changed a lot since the 80s.
Yeah. The political landscape is totally different.
Social media, identity politics.
It's so much harder to get people to agree on anything.
Let alone something as ambitious and controversial
as Project 2025.
So it's a risky bet on their part.
For sure. They're betting that people are fed up with the current administration, that they're disillusioned with progressive policies, and that they're ready for a change.
Whether that actually translates into political power remains to be seen.
It's a gamble.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Definitely.
Will they be able to turn their ideas into real policy changes? And what about pushback from within the government itself? Like, won't the career bureaucrats who've built up this administrative state resist these attempts to dismantle it?
That's a good question.
It seems like there would be a lot of resistance.
Yeah, they're definitely aware of that possibility.
Okay.
And they've got some strategies for dealing with it.
Like what?
One of the main things is stacking the deck with loyalists.
Right. We talked about that earlier.
They want to fill key positions with people who share their ideology. And who are committed to carrying out their agenda.
So it's about having the right people in place and a clear plan to guide their actions.
Exactly.
But what about all the legal and procedural hurdles?
Oh, there will be plenty of those.
Right. The American system of government is designed to prevent big, sudden changes in policy.
It's all about checks and balances.
Right. To ensure stability.
And continuity.
Exactly.
They know all about those constraints.
Okay.
And they're ready to challenge them.
How?
They want to use executive power more aggressively.
Interesting.
They think the president has the authority to reshape the government within the limits of the Constitution.
Okay.
They're also prepared to fight legal battles to defend their actions.
So they're willing to push the boundaries.
They are.
Of executive power to get what they want.
They believe they're on the right side of history.
And of the law.
And they're willing to fight for it.
But that's going to create a lot of opposition.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
From Democrats and progressive groups.
Absolutely.
It could make the political climate even more heated.
It's a possibility.
This deep dive into Project 2025 has been really revealing.
It's fascinating stuff.
It's a vision that really embraces those conservative principles and seeks to undo what they see as decades of progressive overreach.
They want to take the country in a very different direction.
But it also raises some serious questions about whether it's even possible, what the consequences might be, and whether it can actually work.
In the real world of American politics.
It's a bold plan.
It is.
And it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
I'm curious to see how it all unfolds.
It's almost like they're trying to frame this Sabbath as a reset button for the government.
Yeah, it's a powerful metaphor.
It makes you think about the why behind all of this. Like, we've talked about the specific policies they want to change.
Right.
But what's the real driving force behind this whole project?
I think you have to understand the deep sense of grievance that's fueling this movement.
Okay.
They really believe that conservative values have been sidelined, that the government and even the culture at large have been taken over by a liberal elite that's totally out of touch with ordinary Americans.
It's not just about policy.
Right.
It's about a cultural shift, too.
Exactly. They want to change the culture itself.
Wow.
They see this as a pushback against secularism, progressivism, moral relativism.
They think America has lost its way.
Yeah, they think the country has strayed from its core principles.
Here's what I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
How do they reconcile this desire for smaller government with these incredibly ambitious plans to remake the federal bureaucracy?
Right.
It seems kind of contradictory.
That tension is definitely there throughout Project 2025.
Yeah.
On the one hand, they want to shrink the government, get it out of people's lives.
But on the other hand...
But they also know that to achieve their goals, they need a strong government, one that's fully on board with their vision.
It looks like they want to have their cake and eat it, too.
Kind of. It's a tricky balancing act.
They're trying to shrink the government while also using it to advance their agenda.
They argue that the key is to focus the government's power on a smaller set of priorities.
Like what?
Things like national security, economic growth, promoting traditional values.
So basically the things that align with their conservative worldview.
Exactly. They want to get rid of agencies and programs they see as unnecessary or even harmful.
While strengthening the ones they think are essential.
Yeah, it raises questions about the role of government in a democracy. Where do they draw the line between legitimate government action and what they consider overreach.
Their critics are definitely going to jump on
Oh, yeah. They'll accuse them of hypocrisy, of using government power to impose their ideology.
It'll be interesting to see how they respond to that.
It's a debate they'll have to engage in.
This deep dive into Project 2025 has been really eye-opening.
It's a fascinating look inside the conservative movement.
It's a plan that could have a huge impact on American politics.
If they can pull it off.
It reflects the hopes and fears of a lot of Americans.
Definitely.
It's a vision for a very different kind of America.
It's both audacious and unsettling.
Yeah.
It shows how powerful ideas can be and how divided our society is right now.
Whether it succeeds or fails, it's going to leave its mark.
No doubt about that.
So where does this leave you, the listener, as you process all of this information?
Think about your own views.
How do you see the role of government?
What are the limits of government power?
What kind of future do you want for America?
These are the questions at the heart of Project 2025.
And they're questions we all need to think about
as we shape the future of our democracy.